Okay, so the NBRC is going to ask 140 questions on the TMC exam. And those 140 questions will fall into one of these three categories. You will have questions that are simple recall questions. So the ability to recall or recognize very specific respiratory care information. These are types of questions that commonly are dealt with memorization. Okay, so you're going to encounter about 33 questions on the TMC that revolve around recall of content. Then there are application questions. So application questions are comprehending, relating, or applying knowledge to new and changing situations. 66 questions out of 140 will be application. So of these three categories, the largest number of questions will be application type questions. And then we have analysis type questions. I call these critical thinking questions. It's the ability to analyze information, put that information together, come up with a solution, or evaluate a usefulness of a particular solution. So it's taking a lot of things, putting them together to figure out what's going wrong, to recommend therapy, or maybe even recommend change in therapy. There are 41 questions out of 140 that are analysis. So when I say don't memorize questions, this is why. Over 100 questions out of the 140 questions that you're going to be taking on the TMC are going to be application and analysis. And if you've gotten through respiratory school for some reason having just memorized and you're not applying these concepts, only 33 of those questions are going to be memorization. So from the onset of RT school, you really need to be working on understanding the concepts, not memorizing to pass a test. All right, so let's just give examples of these questions. So here's an example of a recall question. Which of the following represents a normal potassium level? All right, so in your mind, you go, okay, normal potassium is 3.5 to 5 milliequivalents per liter. And you might have been taught just a little bit differently. Different references, different books have different normal values, but they all are around the same range, okay? So I use 3.5 to 5 when I teach my students. So now this is wanting to know which one of these is normal potassium. So I need to find a number that is in the range of 3.5 to 5. And so when I do this, that means B's my answer. All right, because 4.4 is in that range. This is simple recall. This is memorization. And again, remember, 33% of these will be this type of questions. Also, you know how I told you if you're going to guess C, except with some instructors, they may alphabetize. So this is an example. I know it's numerical, but I've put my answers in an order going from the smallest to the largest. And that, for me, when I build a test, keeps me from always putting C as an answer. All right, here's an example of an application question. So remember, application is taking knowledge and applying it to a certain situation. So a 48-year-old female's ABG shows a metabolic alkalosis. Okay, now if you're in respiratory school, you should know what a metabolic alkalosis looks like on a blood gas. If you're just starting school, you're probably looking at that and saying, I have no idea what that even is. You know, obviously it has to do with pH if we're saying alkalosis, but what is a metabolic alkalosis? I'm going to show you how to maximize your chances of getting this right. So which of the following can be a contributing factor? So basically what's causing this metabolic alkalosis? And so we look down here and we have hypoglycemia, hypokalemia, hyperkalemia, and liver failure. All right. For those of you that know the answer, okay, you should just know the answer. For those of you that this may be absolutely foreign, here's a test-taking tip. If you have two answers that are mirror images of each other or polar opposites of each other, the answer's probably one of those two. So what I mean is when we look at hypo and hyperkalemia, what this means is potassium. Okay, kalemia is potassium. One is a low potassium and one is a high potassium. Mirror images or polar opposites, right? the answer's more than likely going to be B or C. So if you're going to guess, at least that gives you a 50% chance of getting it right. Okay? And we make these type of test questions for students, like you might know that a metabolic alkalosis is caused by a potassium problem, but you don't remember if it's high or low, so they're both there, right? And so you have to know that a metabolic alkalosis causes a hypokalemia. All right, but this is applying metabolic alkalosis and the factor that causes it, so it's applying those two concepts together. Remember, 66 questions are going to be these type of questions. All right, this is still a question about potassium, just a more thought-provoking question. All right, let's talk about analysis questions. Analysis questions are taking a whole lot of different things and putting them together to figure out what to do or to figure out if what we're doing is working. All right, so a 48-year-old male enters the ED complaining of lightheadedness and muscle twitching. Well, we got to start thinking of some things. There's a whole lot of things that can cause lightheadedness, okay? A whole plethora of things. And muscle twitching. So anytime on an exam when I see something about muscles, that if something's wrong with some of the muscles, my first thought is maybe we need to check some electrolytes. So I'm opening my mind up to maybe we need to look at some electrolytes. The ECG shows depression of the ST segment. Now, you may not know what that means, but it has to do with the heart, right? Okay, and the heart is a skeletal muscle. Okay, so I've got muscle twitching, something going wrong with the heart, which is a muscle. And the ABG reveals a metabolic alkalosis. Oh, we just had that on the previous question. This is a good test-taking tip also. Sometimes within the test, you may gain some knowledge that helps you determine a right answer. So we already know that a metabolic alkalosis is caused by a low potassium, hypokalemia, right? All right, so which of the following would the therapist recommend to help determine the underlying cause? So hopefully you've drilled down to right now you need to ask for some electrolytes. You need to analyze your electrolytes. Now you have to figure out which one of these will give you electrolytes. So the CBC will not give you electrolytes. CBC tells us about white blood cell, red blood cells, and hemoglobin, basically. Liver panel tells us about liver enzyme. There's nothing here that even remotely relates to the liver. A lipid panel, these will be things that tell us about like cholesterol and triglycerides. Well, that's not what we've got going on here. So it must be the basic or a metabolic panel. That's absolutely right, because the metabolic panel are going to give us things like BUN, creatinine, and glucose, and all of the other electrolytes. So, of which potassium will be one of those electrolytes, and all of these things are caused by a low potassium. So this is an analysis question, and there are 41 some odd questions that are analysis. So your TMC is going to be wrapped around these three types of questions. All right. Come back to me in just a minute, and we're going to talk about the types of questions sometimes that your instructors may use. See you in a few.